Hello, Mozakins. Welcome to Outside Source. 2 oil tankers have been hit by explosions in one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. The Iranians say someone staged the attacks to embarrass them. The US has a different view.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for the attacks that occurred in the Gulf of Oman today.
Well, the Iranians are saying it wasn't us, but the Americans are saying, yes, it was. They're blaming Iran for a suspected attack on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. One is reported to have been hit by a torpedo. We know that crew had to be rescued from both. And we have this video that's been released by the Iranian Navy, which shows the Norwegian ship, the Front Altair. It's carrying 75,000 tons of a particular type of crude oil. And we know the crew reported 3 explosions. Now, the tankers were sailing through the Strait of Hormuz, which you can see marked there. And this graphic here shows the route that these 2 boats were taking as they moved out of the Gulf of Oman, and that's when the explosions happened. Both were around 30 kilometers from the coast of Iran, and the owners of both ships say they believe this was an attack. Now, this is the second serious incident involving a tanker close to the Strait of Hormuz in a month. No one's claimed responsibility this time, but Iran was the first to respond. Here's the Iranian foreign minister saying reported attacks on Japan-related tankers occurred when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was meeting the Ayatollah Khomeini for extensive talks. He says suspicious doesn't begin to describe what likely transpired this morning. Now, to explain, one of the ships certainly is Japanese owned. The other, though, is owned by Norway, so I'm not sure why he's suggesting both are related to Japan. Either way, Iran has many suspicions, but so do the Americans. Here's Mike Pompeo.
It is the assessment of the United States government that the Islamic Republic of Iran is responsible for the attacks that occurred in the Gulf of Oman today. This assessment is based on intelligence, the weapons used, the level of expertise needed to execute the operation, recent similar Iranian attacks on shipping, and the fact that no proxy group operating in the area has the resources and proficiency to act with such a high degree of sophistication.
Now, the Strait of Hormuz is what analysts call a choke point, and you can see why on the map here. It's an area of huge importance to the oil industry. It links the Middle East oil producers to the rest of the world, and around 19 million barrels pass through this area every single day. That's about 1/5 of the world's oil exports. And we also know at its narrowest point, this strait separates Oman and Iran by just 33 kilometers. And this picture gives you an idea of quite how busy it is. This graphic marks all of the boats that were in the area just before these explosions happened. And if you look at oil prices, you can also see how much this route matters. They were up nearly 3% after news of the explosions came through. Well, for analysis on both perspectives of this story, I've been speaking to BBC Persian's Barman Kabasi and Barbara Plett-Usher, the BBC State Department correspondent. First of all, here's Barbara on what the Americans are saying to back up their claims.
That list of things he mentioned, intelligence, previous attacks, type of weapons used, and so on. So it's an assessment by the United States, but he is the only one, or the U.S. is the only one that's come out so far and made a definitive statement about this attack, or frankly, the previous one that took place a few weeks earlier against 4 tankers off of the United Arab Emirates. There, the U.S. also said it was almost certain that it was Iran, whereas other parties did not make that definitive a claim. Now, it's interesting that that incident and the one today does show how easy it is really to disrupt the oil, the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and to disrupt global oil prices. So one would have thought this might be a limitation of the maximum pressure campaign that the U.S. has been imposing on Iran, if it is indeed Iran and if it is responding in this way. But Mr. Pompeo said this showed the success of the sanctions, that Iran did not have a right to respond to economic sanctions by targeting oil tankers and by harming civilians.
Barbara, thank you. Let's bring in Barman in New York. Help us understand what the Iranians are saying think happened here.
Well, other than what you read, which is we were set up, the idea that the Supreme Leader was meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan as this happened, given that one of the ships was Japan-owned, it is creating that sort of doubt even inside Iran, and especially from the point of view of the government, that this was an operation to embarrass them or make that trip unsuccessful. However, in that very meeting, the Supreme Leader of Iran said that he's not going to respond to any message that President of the United States had sent through the Japanese Prime Minister, because it was America and this administration in Washington that has violated the nuclear deal, has brought back sanctions. He even pointed out that right before Prime Minister of Japan's trip to Iran, U.S. took another step in sanctioning Iran's petrochemical industry, which is huge, part of Iran's exports. So it was clear from the Iranian point of view that there is nothing to talk about to this administration as long as they are in violation of the deal of the UN Security Council 2231. Yet to have this incident happen on the very same day, it does give them some leeway to at least argue that this seems something far-fetched from something they would do because there's nothing to be gained from it. Of course, there are others who argue that, in fact, Iran is now responding to the fact that the economic warfare, as they call it, and sanctions by the United States is putting them in a position where they have no choice but to respond. In fact, one former Pentagon official tweeted first thing in the morning that when you poke a country in the eye so long, at some point they're going to react, and this is to be expected.
Barman and Barbara, don't go anywhere. Stay with us, please, because there's a lot that we don't know about this story, but we can at least work through the details that we can be a little sure of. So the first reports of this explosion came from the UK's Maritime Trade Operations website. It was warning all ships passing through the strait to exercise extreme caution. Next, the US Navy picked up distress signals. It sent a ship to assist, and we had this statement from US Central Command saying it had rescued some crew off the boats. But in direct contradiction to that, according to Iran, it was Iranian ships that rescued all the crews. And an Iranian news agency, Fast News, posted this picture, which, as you can see, shows the fire on board the Norwegian ship. It also quoted the Iranian government, and in this statement here, carried a statement that there was a warning that some countries are trying to deceive people to cause instability in the region. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail. First of all, with international reaction, we know the European Union has expressed concern. We've heard from an industry body representing tankers saying if the waters are becoming unsafe, the supply to the entire Western world could be at risk. And we've heard from the UN. This is the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres.
I note with deep concern this morning's security incidents in the Strait of Hormuz. I strongly condemned any attack against civilian vessels. Facts must be established and responsibilities clarified. And if there is something the world cannot afford, is a major confrontation in the Gulf region.
Let's go back to Barbara. So, Barbara, let's follow this through. If the Americans are saying something as serious as Iran firing at international tankers, what are its options in terms of how it can react?
Yes, it was interesting that Secretary Pompeo sent a very clear message, I think, that he did not, or that the U.S. did not want to escalate militarily. He said we are sticking with our diplomatic and economic strategy. By that he means isolating Iran diplomatically and squeezing it economically. As you know, a couple of weeks ago, the Americans sent military reinforcements to the region because they said that they had been threatened by attack and they thought that these attacks were imminent. And that raised a lot of concern about possible military clashes. And Mr. Pompeo didn't say anything about that. He referred to diplomatic and military and economic strategy. He did note, however, as Bahman was saying, that the Supreme Leader had turned down, had rejected any calls for talks transmitted by Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, which he then said was a humiliation for Mr. Abe that the tanker had been attacked. And then we had a tweet from Mr. Trump thanking Mr. Abe for his intervention, but saying it's way too early for a deal. They feel that way, the Iranians feel that way, and so do we. So they're still talking about talks, but talks that aren't happening. But there hasn't been any military rhetoric around the response of the Americans.
Barbara, thank you very much indeed. Barman, let's bring you in as well again. Talk to us about what Shinzo Abe and Iran hope to achieve with this meeting?
Well, it seemed that Shinzo Abe was hoping to at least find a way to de-escalate between the two sides. Now, this incident has put a cloud over that attempt as well. But nevertheless, the hope here was, even though there's no imminent way to resolve the serious the difficulties that there and disagreements that exist between Washington and Tehran, at least make sure that both sides step back from the verge of a possible military confrontation. But also, the reality is the American maximum pressure policy was supposed to produce two results. One was to bring Iran back to the table to agree to more favorable terms in the nuclear deal, and the other was to confine or confront its regional activity and limit it. Neither one has happened. Practically, Iran has said on the same day to Mr. Abe that there is nothing to talk about to a party that has violated the deal. And, of course, if we believe American version of the story that Iran was behind it, then clearly the opposite is happening, that regional activity and escalation is what's taking place, not Iran stepping back. So as far as maximum pressure is concerned, that is not giving the dividends that the Americans at least stated was their goal. As far as Mr. Abe's goal was here to de-escalate and find a way for both sides to at least talk, that seems to also have been filed away as this happened. The problem right now really is that there is no de-escalation or diplomatic off-ramp for both sides to step away from an accident. In fact, Mr. Abe did warn about that, and a conflict that could happen.